Good evening to all the participants and a warm welcome to CredAvenue's webinar on infrastructure financing. My name is Shubham Jain and I lead the infrastructure and real estate platform at CredAvenue. This webinar is a part of our Spotlight series wherein we discuss trends in the financial ecosystem and other sectoral developments with senior industry leaders. For today's webinar, I'm joined by Mr. Nilesh Sampath, who is CFO at Aseem Infrastructure Finance Limited. Mr. Sampath has about 22 years of experience running CFO and finance offices across financial services in his previous assignments with Edelweiss Group, Kotak Private Equity, and Standard Chartered Bank. He has also managed assurance and financial due diligence mandates for large public companies during his work with Deloitte India. We also have Mr. Utsav Mehrotra, who is Head of Treasury at Aseem Infra. Utsav is a seasoned debt and equity fundraising professional with experience in NBFC treasury and investment banking domain. He has been involved in formulating capital raise strategy, cultivating and fostering relationships with external stakeholders, and managing complete process execution. He has over 12 years of experience and previously worked with organizations such as Lending Cart and Axis Capital. We will now start with a brief presentation covering trends in infrastructure financing, update on national infrastructure pipeline, and outlook on the sector. Post this, we will have a corporate presentation from Aseem Infrastructure team, followed by a Q&A session. So as I briefly mentioned about the agenda of today's presentation, we'll be discussing about the four broad topics: trends in infrastructure financing, the update and opportunities in national infrastructure pipeline, which was finally announced in April 2020, the key challenges that lenders generally face while taking an exposure to infrastructure sector, and our outlook on the sector. Next, please. Yeah. So if we see from the graphs shown here on the total infrastructure credit, how it has grown over the last 6 years. So overall, the growth in infrastructure credit from FY15 to FY21 has been at a CAGR of roughly around 8.5%. And in absolute terms, it has grown from rupees 15 lakh crores to 25 lakh crores. But one thing to be noticed here is that this growth has been largely driven by infrastructure finance companies who have really grown quite aggressively in last 6 years at a CAGR of roughly around 15%, whereas banks' growth had been tepid at roughly around 3%. There are various reasons why banks have taken a backseat in the last 6 years. A lot of banks were under PCA regime. Many of them were under mergers with the larger banks, and a lot of them were in recovery mode and resolving their legacy NPA issues. Because of that, if we see as a total of non-food credit, the share of infrastructure credit for banks also came down from a high of 15% in FY15 to around 10% in FY21. Nevertheless, the exposure to road sector continued to grow with very strong traction seen in the new HAM model, which was introduced in the year 2016. Renewables and airport are the other two fast-growing segments. Also, what we have seen in the last 5 years, there have been a very active M&A market for an stabilized and operational infrastructure projects, which has also helped developers and sponsors reducing their overall debt requirements. So that is also one of the reasons why we have not seen a significant offtake in the last 6 years. Though we are seeing a good signs of pickup, if we notice in FY21, the growth had been higher at around 10% in the overall infrastructure credit. Next, please. As I was referring to the previous slide, that the shares of IFCs, which was around 37% in FY15, has, with the stupendous growth of CAGR of 15%, has grown to a share of 54%. So now IFCs, infrastructure finance companies, has a share larger than overall commercial banks in terms of exposure to the infrastructure credit. Now this has happened because of a variety of reasons. One, banks themselves were going slow. Secondly, various government liquidity packages for DISCOMs, those were also done through the IFCs such as REC and PFCs, which also increased their exposure towards the infrastructure. Railway projects, and railway capex, which was one of the mainstay for the current government. These all capex happens through the main IFC, which is IRFC, which also supported high growth. On the other hand, some schemes like UDAY also led to decline in share of banks because the exposure was converted from bank loans into loans. Another thing to notice that though overall share of IFCs have grown from 37% to 54%, but within IFCs, if we see the division between public sector IFCs such as IRFC, PFC, REC, IFCL, HUDCO, etc., they command a share of 95%, and the other private IDFs and IFCs have a smaller 5% as of now. Next slide, please. In terms of sector exposure, power sector continues to be the leader, even though other sectors have been taking leaps in growing the overall exposure. The power sector continues to have the highest share of around 58% in the total infrastructure credit, though it has come down from 64% in 2015. It has come down in percentage terms, not in absolute terms. In absolute terms, it has grown only from around 10 lakh crores to around 14 lakh crores in FY21. We have also seen a trend that renewables and transmission and distribution segment is growing much faster and taking over the share of thermal, where the projects have been stuck and had faced a lot of issues in the past. Road sector currently has a share of around 12% of the overall infrastructure credit and has been growing very rapidly over the last few years with the spurt in demand because of the new HAM model. Other segments which are shown in the orange bar here, that is largely driven by airport infrastructure, where we are seeing significant expansion happening across the private sector airports. Next slide, please. Coming on to the National Infrastructure Pipeline, an update and opportunities. Initially, the NIP was first announced during the independence speech in the year 2019. The first draft was released somewhere in November 2019, when a total outlay of around 111 lakh crore was planned under NIP. And the final report was released in April 2020, where all projects which are more than 100 crores have been captured under NIP. Now, as per the latest data available from government's website, the size of NIP has grown from 111 crores to around rupees 145 lakh crores and spread across 7 major segments and entailing and including 9,000 odd projects. So this size has grown considerably from the initial conceptualization of NIP. If we see the graph below, there are 7 main segments which are included in NIP, including transportation, social infrastructure, water and sanitation, energy, commercial infrastructure, logistics, and communication. Out of this, transportation, including roads and bridges, airports, rail, metro, all these subsegments is the largest pie and have around 50% of the total projects under NIP at around 4,582 projects and an outlay of 59 odd lakh crores, followed by energy with a cost of 35 lakh crores with the 685 projects. Next slide, please. NIP definitely is a very ambitious plan and entails a significant ramp up in capex that we have been doing. So as a country, we have been spending around rupees 10 lakh crores per annum on capital investment in the infrastructure if we take average of last 5 years, and which has been contributed from state capex at around 4.5 lakh crores, then central capex of similar amount, and balance coming from private sector. Now, if we have to really achieve this target of 145 lakh crores within this 6-7 financial year period, definitely a significant ramp up is required in the entire capex from all the segments, state, center, as well as the private sector. In terms of funding also, if we see center and state combined is around 50 odd percent, and then the monetization under the government's national monetization plan, that will contribute roughly 3 to 5%, banks and NBFCs another 20 to 27%, and then it's the private sector. So there is a need to also explore new funding avenues, especially considering the high fiscal deficit that government is facing and also the low appetite that we are seeing from the private sector. Next slide, please. In terms of the progress also, we tried to do some research and tabulate the data here. In terms of project completion, the progress has remained pretty slow as of now. As per the latest data available, out of 9,000 odd projects under NIP, only 5% of them have been completed, while another 52%, which is around 4,700 projects, are under implementation. In terms of cost, if we see, and assuming that for the under implementation projects, 30% of the cost may have been spent so far and 70% is yet to be spent, and adding the other projects which are yet to be awarded, then a significant sum of money is yet to be spent under this NIP, which is roughly 83% of the total plan. So we are talking about huge numbers here. So definitely we expect some slippages in terms of target, but at the same time, it provides a lot of opportunities in terms of investments and lending. Transportation in terms of performance has remained the best performing sector in overall execution and the number of projects under implementation, and strong visibility on awardings also, followed by energy, where a large proportion of projects have been completed. But if we see in terms of cost, again, there 70% of the cost is yet to be spent. Yeah, next slide, please. So roads and bridges remains the largest subsegment. So under transportation, on the first slide of NIP, which you saw, around 4,500 projects are under transportation segment. And within the transportation segment, roads and bridges is the largest subsegment, involving around 3,400 odd projects with an outlay of 30 lakh crores. And it will be a mix of national and state highways. Yesterday only we have seen inauguration of a large expressway in Uttar Pradesh also. So there have been a lot of focus on from the states also in improving their internal infrastructure and spurring the economic activity. Hybrid annuity model, which was launched in Jan 2016, has really received a very strong traction. It has also got good acceptance from the lenders and investors. And we are already seeing some M&A activity happening there on the operational projects, which have got completed and received 1 or 2 annuities. Awards have picked up very significantly in the last 2 years, but still a significant ramp up is required to complete 35,000 odd kilometers long Bharatmala program. Though execution has really remained a very strong signal that despite COVID in FY21, we were able to achieve one of the highest ever execution of 37 kilometers per day. But again, the target is very stiff. So possibly this 37 kilometers will have to be converted into 60 kilometers per day very soon to achieve the timelines. Next slide, please. Second largest subsegment across the various subsegment remains the renewable energy. Under NIP, there are total 253 projects which are planned with an outlay of 16.5 lakh crores. We have seen significant investments happening in the renewable sector, with RE capacity increasing to 26%, roughly around 1 lakh megawatts out of the total capacity of around 4 lakh megawatts operational in the country as on September 21. Solar power segment remains the key driver of capacity addition, with a share of roughly 45% or in absolute terms 45,000 megawatts of RE capacity. In terms of concern, definitely the current prevailing low tariffs coupled with rising module cost remains a key concern from project viability point of view. So some correction possibly is required on this side. Next slide, please. Now we will briefly speak about the challenges that we see lenders face while taking an exposure to infrastructure projects. First and foremost, anything which strikes anyone when we talk about infrastructure project is time and cost overrun, which is the truth of life. And that is why a lot of lenders stay away from greenfield, and we never see any kind of investor activity happening in greenfield or even in brownfield because of the uncertainties involved in the execution and the various challenges involved. So MOSPI, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, they very closely track the performance of the projects on a monthly basis. So as per the report released in October 21, there still almost 50% of the projects are running with a delay of average of 25 to 40 months. And further 568 projects out of 1670 projects which they are tracking are facing an average cost overrun of around 20% over the initial cost. So this time and cost overrun has a huge bearing on the overall project viability. It creates various issues for the lenders also in terms of inability to achieve the scheduled commercial operation date and then getting categorization as NPA and other related challenges. So this is something which definitely needs a very closer look for attracting interest from varied lenders in the sector. Next slide, please. Other challenge that we have noticed while analyzing the infra projects is high variation in revenue and cost estimation. Now, because of very long-term nature of such projects, it becomes very, very difficult to accurately estimate and predict the cost and revenue for a long period of time, say 15, 20 or 25 years. And in addition, in absence of scientific tools to capture past trends and accurately use predictive models, also increases the challenge of underwriting such infra projects. As per one study done on 60 toll road projects, the base traffic for such toll projects was lower by an average of 30 to 45%. So one can imagine what would have happened to the IRRs and the project viability of such projects. A change in technology and diminishing utility of such projects also impacts the cash flows. Other major concern which we have noticed and heard from the lenders is development of competing projects, which were not anticipated at the time of financial closure, like maybe improvement of a parallel state highway or a competing railway network or any other mode. Now, many times because ministries work like independently, so the projects, instead of complementing each other, starts competing with each other, which we have seen in case of DFC with possibly some existing road highways, which will happen, and that some commercial traffic may shift. So now government has taken this initiative of Gati Shakti of unifying all the ministries. So hopefully this risk may get handled going forward. Other issue is limited use of early warning signals and alternate data to ensure timely monitoring. And softer issues like governance related to proper maintenance of escrow, creation of adequate provisions and commingling of funds always remains a lingering factor. Next slide, please. Having enumerated all the concerns, NPA ratios have come down very significantly in this sector over the last 5 years. It peaked at around 22.8% GNPA for infrastructure sector in March 2018. But with aggressive write-offs and due to policies from RBI and some resolutions also, the levels have come down to not a comfortable, but still a sensible 10.5 as on March 2021. But still, infra as a sector contributes to around 35% of the total NPAs, industry NPAs, in terms of absolute numbers. Resolution of under-implementation projects has seen limited success because of delays making them unviable. But operational projects have seen good success, where many resolutions have been implemented without major haircuts for the lenders. Next slide, please. On the last section, on the outlook, again, we expect the activity to remain very high in this sector with government's focus on infrastructure development. Around 3,900 projects are yet to be awarded under NIP, involving a cost of 72 lakh crores and taking same ratio of 25%. So 18 to 20 lakh crore may be the lending opportunity. States are expected to play a key role, especially the large ones like Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, which combined have been spending around 2.5 to 3 lakh crores annually on capex. So their role will remain very critical. In terms of segments, roads, airports, renewable and transmission are expected to remain the flavor of the market, where we'll see a lot of interest from the investors and the lenders. And high level of M&A activity is also expected to continue in operational and stabilized projects, which will help to keep the leverage of developers under control and also improving the overall governance in the sector. And last but not the least, InvITs, we expect to be a very, very successful model, which it has also played out over the last 18 months. We have seen various InvIT issuances, and there is a very strong pipeline also. So that will also present an opportunity to the lenders to lend at the trust level, which are rated much higher because of pooling structure and lower leverage. So till now, around 65,000 crore of debt has been mobilized amongst the 8 InvITs which have listed so far. So with this, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'll invite Mr. Sampath to come and give us a brief on their organization.
Thank you, Shubham, and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking out time and attending our webinar. And Shubham did give a very elaborate presentation on the infrastructure landscape. We'll start with a presentation on ASEEM Infrastructure Finance. Can I have the first slide, please? So we'll talk about because we are a new platform, we are a new entity, so we'll talk about where we stand in terms of the platform. We'll talk about what is the regulatory landscape that governs us. We'll talk about how we are looking at our business plans going forward over the near, medium, and the long term. And of course, we'll talk about the processes, the governance that we uphold and we have and plan to build as we go along our journey. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm sure all of us are aware, ASEEM Infrastructure Finance is essentially a startup. In a sense, it is part of the NIIF infrastructure debt financing platform. NIIF is the Government of India backed sovereign fund, which has been in the equity financing space on the infrastructure side for now about 5 years or so. And it has 3 funds and has about in excess of $4.5 billion of commitments. ASEEM Infrastructure is an entity subscribed to and floated by one of those funds, which is the Special Opportunities Fund. And ASEEM is the debt platform from which infrastructure credit financing shall happen. On the right, if I may talk about the holding structure and the way ASEEM is structured, as I said, the Strategic Opportunities Fund holds about 55%, and the Government of India, via the November 2020 announcement under the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan, it had announced a 6,000 crore equity commitment to the debt platform of NIIF, and of which, of course, the commitment was inked in this March of 2021. And we have also drawn down as a platform between us and our sponsored associate company, which is the IDF. And I'll talk about that as well. We've drawn down 1,000 crores out of that. We still have 5,000 crores of equity runway available from the Government of India as we go ahead. SOF, as I said, is focused on sectors which are going to show significant growth in India, both in infrastructure and other sectors. And the debt financing platform is made up of ASEEM and the NIIF Infra Finance Limited entity, which is an NBFC IDF. So we are an NBFC IFC, ASEEM Infrastructure, and our associate company, wherein we hold an associate stake, is an NBFC IDF. So essentially, it's a platform where we have synergies that will go together in the way we go ahead and carry out our business. There will be constraints in terms of structure, but we do not have similar constraints, and that's a large positive which we shall be capitalizing as we go ahead. Next slide, please. A few highlights about ASEEM. As I said, we are an IFC. We were incorporated in May of 2019. We received the RBI license in January 2020, and we essentially started lending operations very much during COVID in August of 2020. So essentially, we've been in as an operating entity for about 14 or 15 months till now. We have, as you see on the right, FY20 we didn't have a book, but we had a very strong net worth. 21 we ended with a loan book of about 1,600 crores. And H1, which has just gone past, we are almost at 3,000 crores of net loan book. We also have a healthy, bottom line as is visible. We have a very strong balance sheet in terms of net worth at 2,300 crores, and we intend to, over the very near term, we intend to operate at a lower leverage than how most NBFCs shall do. Our statutory auditors, as we see, are BK Khare. We have a AA plus from all 3 CRISIL, ICRA, and CARE, and we have large single borrower and group borrower limits that we can work on, and that gives us an ability to have larger ticket underwriting transactions that we can do. Next slide, please. This slide depicts a scene so far. It's a journey, as I said, over the period that I just mentioned. We commenced in August, and those are the various milestones at which essentially we clocked 500,000, 1,500, 2,000, and 3,000 crores. We are now 3,000 crores. We are a shade under in September, as I just said. We are now 3,000 crores in October. It is one of the fastest growing entities in the sector. I spoke about the other items there. A little on the portfolio mix today. We have so largely it's been renewables and solar, to be particular. So 55% of our book is on the solar side. We have roads of the other 30%, and we have transmission and airports, both about 7-8% each. Our portfolio rating is a very sound rating at AA, and we have a reasonable size in terms of the average book that we have. Liability side, despite the net worth that we have of 2,300 crores, we have liabilities to the extent of about 1,300 crores as of September. We have a mix of public and private sector banks, and we also have tapped the capital markets for our funding needs. Next slide, please. Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you. So a bit about the broad regulatory landscape, essentially, just to give a brief idea about what we are by structure and how we are regulated. It's an NBFC IFC. It's a license which is a separate NBFC license from the government, and it can lend across various phases, the whole life cycle of the infrastructure financing space. It can do greenfield, brownfield, and operational projects. These are the criteria which we all know that relate to an NBFC in terms of how RBI requires the minimum capital, the net worth, and credit ratings act. We are committed to have a diverse set of borrowing structures. We are also eligible to actually sponsor an IDF, and that is exactly what we have done once our platform had acquired our NIF IFL, which is our associate IDF. Exposure, as I said, we cannot lend as an entity structurally for all IFCs. We cannot lend in excess of 25% of own funds to a single party, or in excess of 40% to any single borrower group per se as an aggregate, and that applies to all IFCs. Next slide, please. In terms of what we, from a strategic standpoint, aspire to kind of clock in the years as we go. Of course, we are very young, and as the environment pans out, and the way Shubham kind of spoke about a very, very, very promising outlook in this space, certainly our strategy shall also, take all that into account. But yeah, as we are in the first couple of years of our existence, it's essentially been, focusing on very select sectors that we have expertise in, and not coincidental, but certainly planned. Shubham mentioned that roads and solar are essentially the largest sectors even in the NIP, and that's exactly where we have most of our book. So that is where we have expertise, and we have built expertise, and we still are a young organization. We are building our business credit and our enterprise teams, and we are building expertise to diversify into adjacent segments as well. So first couple of years, we've wanted to have a conservative LM policy, very conservative LM policy, and essentially build a very strong balance sheet and only venture into segments where we are very comfortable. Going over the next 3 to 5 years of life of the entity, We shall, as I said, enhance our sectoral exposure. We shall get into other adjacent sectors. We will, as you can see on the screen, we look at relationships deepening. We look at a much more deepened liability mix, which is even diversified as well across investors, across long-term investors with patient capital, both on the equity as well as the credit side. And over 5 to 6 years and onwards, we want to lead in terms of actually being a specialized infrastructure financing layer and be dominant in the space. We know that banks today are large competitors, and a few banks are extremely aggressive now in the infra space. But we all know also that banks essentially, while they can do a whole spectrum of lending across various businesses, various segments, and depending on when some particular sectors or segments start looking promising, capital from banks is essentially diverted more towards that. On that platform, essentially, a SEAM per se and the debt platform at NIIF, including a SEAM and the IDF, are a very specialized lending platform. We are very specialized merely onto infrastructure financing, and that's something that we are going to leverage on. So also, the synergies that we have with the fund throughout the journey. A bit on the items towards the end of the slide below. We are very ESG focused in terms of what we want to lend to, the projects that we want to lend to. We have a very aligned, we have a strong and formal CSR policy. We believe in getting there going forward and leading underwriting transactions so that we have space at the table and able to get terms as we want. And of course, we also will have enough girth to be able to kind of influence the space and also have advocacy presence in the space. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this essentially is how we go forward. And again, explained over 3 phases. The first phase, as I said, we will have low or softer spreads, and we will essentially look at operational assets. And as we go further in terms of the timeline, over the next 4 or 5 years and all, we will have a reasonable mix of operational projects as greenfield and brownfield projects as well, besides the operation that we have started with. And that also kind of adds to the spreads that we have. Having said that, the highlight and the essence, the underlining essence shall always be having an extremely pristine book. It sounds cliched because every NBFC will say that, but it's very prominent as we want to plan and build our balance sheet and our portfolio. The idea is to have a very pristine credit quality and build a strong balance sheet. As initial target sectors, as I said, being roads, transmission, green energy, and the adjacent ones that we will foray and have also done to an extent by now are, of course, airport, healthcare, ports, and education. Our policy is to have a conservative liability policy. We will, as I said, also lever much lesser, have a high capital mix on the balance sheet. And we also believe in having a significantly higher liquidity buffer to aid us in situations like the one that we have witnessed over the last 1.5 years. Next slide, please. The governance structure and the framework that we have at SEAM, of course, it's a board-governed entity. So the board at the very apex, and we have the credit committee, the RMC, the audit committee, the NRC, CSR, the IT strategy committee, and the ANCO. So all these committees are formal committees, and essentially, I'll not get into what the mandate for each is because all of us know that, but we at Aseem hold governance standards very high in terms of what we want to achieve and run our business and build the business with. And that is one of the basic essentials that we enshrine in our charter. Next slide, please. Some details about our illustrious board. We have as our chairman, Mr. Prakash Rao. He is the executive director at NIIF and the head of indirect investments, a veteran in this space for many years in terms of experience. We have Rajiv Dhar. He is the chief operating officer at NIIF, and we have Saurabh Jain, the CFO at NIIF Limited, the fund, and all three are of course nominees of NIIF. On the independent directors side, the next slide, please. We have Mr. Chandrasekharan V. He has had more than 3.5 decades of experience at the Life Insurance Corporation. His last role being executive director of investments at the LIC. And Ms. Rosemary Sebastian, she was the head of the NBS last at the RBI. So in terms of the guidance and the direction and the control and the governance that is supervised at and directed by the board is also very important at Aseem, and the board is always there to kind of guide and direct the operations as we build out for many years to come. The management team, on the next slide, please. Mr. Virender Pankaj is the CEO of Aseem, and he has managed in excess of $7 billion of asset book on the infra side. He has also been experienced on the structured corporate finance side. He has about over 29 years of experience with L&T Finance and various other institutions before that. The next one is mine, of course. Shubham gave an introduction of me. Then we have heads of all functions in terms of the credit head. Utsav, of course, also on the call, is our treasury head, and Anirban is the business head. All come with a very deep and varied experience, essentially in the infra space. And this management team, as we build it as well, we believe will hold us and the entity in very good stead as we build out our businesses. That I think is our brief introduction. Over to you, Shubham.
Thank you, Nilesh, for this good oversight on the company, and I think the way you are growing rapidly as well as in a controlled manner, that really is very heartening to see. And the way you have ramped up from 0 to 3,000 crores in a matter of 10 months, again, shows about the caliber of the team that you have. So I request all the participants to start putting in their queries and questions for Nilesh, Utsav, or myself in the Q&A chat so that we can pick it up. In the meantime, let me start, Nilesh, with the elephant in the room. Again, Aseem, because of its lineage with NIIF and lineage with Government of India, is seen as a GOI entity. So how would you really say about the independence of this entity and also the overall operations, the way it is managed, and in terms of the swiftness of the decisions which are taken?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, yeah, Shubham, I think, yeah, you're right. That is the elephant in the room, and let me speak about that a little. So Aseem is, as I just spoke, and as we see, it is made up of all, from management team standpoint. If I would want to talk first, there are people who have come in from private sector who have been involved in this particular space, all their lives in terms of a career. from capitalization and currently as there is the stake that is held. NIIF, of course, the fund holds majority as well as controlling stake. It has 3 directors on the board, but the fund is essentially anchor capital, introduced by, it has an anchor capital by the government. The fund has other LPs, very large, and SOF, just to add one step back, I'll add that SOF is the third fund, or the third fund in chronology that was set up at the NIIF. The first 2 funds also similarly were introduced with anchor capital from the government. And then a lot of very hefty, very large long-term LPs came into the fund, I'm sure comforted by the anchor capital from the government as well. So same is the journey that SOF is going through. So large sovereigns, pension funds, etc., are going to be LPs. They already are in the today, a few of them, and essentially, therefore, the fund really is not a government fund per se in terms of its holding as well. The government, as I indicated, came directly as a capital investor, equity investor into a scene, though in March of this year. Again, it is a minority stake. The government equity is never going to go above 49%. That is enshrined. It will hold a significant minority typically, but from an operational standpoint, the government or any nominee from the government is not a decision maker. The government is not going to nominate and does not have a board seat even with this capital infusion. Government is happy to essentially have NIIF be the controlling stakeholder. As it goes ahead. So while government has committed 6,000 crores, but it is a newer model that the government has embarked on in terms of it will anchor the entity by giving the earlier significant seed capital, right? Our plan, and we are encouraged to seek in other investors. So as we speak, we are in talks with very large, long-term, patient equity investors who believe in the India infrastructure story, who are looking at a long-term presence, who will continue to also participate in following rounds that we do on the equity side. And that is exactly how we are planning to do it. So we seek private capital, and we will also augment it from the 5,000 crores that is left out of the government commitment. So in fact, we are at very advanced stages with one of the investors, and we shall be able to kind of come out with that as well. So to say from a decision standpoint, operation standpoint, operating direction standpoint, it really is not a government influenced entity or a business model.
Sure. Great. Also coming to you, you are leading the treasury at ASEAN. Now, Nilesh also mentioned that definitely you will face the competition from large banks and other IFCs who are already operating in the market. So I understand you are already rated at AA+. So can you give us some color on your liability side, average borrowing cost, etc.?
Yeah, so on the liability side, as Nilesh mentioned, in the last 10-12 months, we have basically garnered lines of about 1,500 crores. In terms of type of investors, we have a public sector bank, we have a couple of private sector banks, plus a foreign bank as well. So we have a diversified liability pool on the banking side, and plus we will keep on adding more and more banks on that side. On the capital market side, we have done an issuance of unlisted NCDs, and so now we have got approval from NSE, in principle approval for doing a listed NCD as well. And we plan to come out with listed NCD issuances on the capital market side as well. On the investor categories for the capital markets, right now we have, since we have done only one unlisted NCD, there's a limited investor category who participated in that. Now going forward, we want to attract more institutional investors, insurance companies, pension funds, mutual funds. So they can obviously participate and diversify the liability book on the capital market side as well. And on the medium-term plan, we intend to reach out to the overseas market as well, and some of the global investors and some of the sovereign funds that Nilesh was talking about, who are anyways participating at the NIF platform as well. We want to reach out to them and explore their interest, whether they want to lend directly to Aseem as well. So from a strategy perspective, we plan to diversify the liability sources. And ultimately, the cost part obviously is a derivative of the type of investors that we have and the rating that we will ultimately achieve in the medium term. So we will plan to be competitive on that front. Even right now, we have a very competitive rate in terms of our cost of borrowing.
Nilesh, in relation itself, there is a question from a participant. They want to know, is there any further capital infusion by GOI planned anytime soon?
So as I just mentioned, Shubham, we shall take private money. We shall take external money, private money as equity, and then if there is a need, as I said, 5,000 crores is there available for us to take when we want.
Okay,
that is how it is in terms of structure. But we will certainly take it when we need it. It is there available. So it's a runway. It's a clear runway available to us. But as I said, it will not go beyond a particular stake, as I mentioned. But yeah, it will be a minority as dilution happens. Maybe we will take it, but it will be as
Sure.
And just to add, our leverage right now, as we just mentioned, is also extremely low. So we will focus more on diversifying the liability part and raising more debt. And then as and when we require the equity, then we can draw down equity from GOI or any other investor.
Sure. Thank you. In terms of the sectors that you have currently exposure to, as you mentioned in your presentation also, roads, transmission, renewables. Now, we see a widespread interest in these sectors. Now, like as a representative from the lender side, could you please elaborate why these sectors are favored and why others are not?
So one, of course, which we just spoke about at length, is the opportunity or the available opportunity in those sectors. One, two, of course, if one looks at renewables and particularly solar over the last 10 years or so, it has actually not really resulted in a while. Infra NPAs you spoke about at length in your slide, but you would really find very little on solar there, and therefore that kind of and my hunch is a lot of players have kind of realized that, and with the changed landscape, even on the regulatory landscape as well, that's where a lot of interest is coming. But we also see, as you're saying, pretty new age developers, very strong developers coming in, and of course it adds to it. From a financing standpoint as well, there are others, but it adds to competition, but it only kind of makes the market far more mature, far more robust, gives more governance to the market in terms of better players coming in. And that is what is also comforting so far as solar and roads are coming. So you have all these, I will not name them, but large groups of the world who are now entering India. They're very large, globally, but they're entering India a little late. They're entering India now, but they bring with them a lot of governance in what they do. Also, as I said, we are very ESG focused. We are even at this early stage in our existence, we are extremely ESG focused, and a lot of these players are very much ESG focused themselves as well. So there is a lot of interest in these sectors, and rightly so. And our expertise, as I said, is around these today. We will build adjacency to it and build it.
Okay. And since you brought this point on large equity investors coming in, showing high interest in infrastructure space. Now, from lenders' point of view, definitely, as you have rightly pointed out, they improve the governance standards significantly. The discipline is much higher in terms of escrow and cash flow, ring fencing, etc. But also on the other side, these players hesitate in giving any kind of undertakings or any kind of soft guarantees, limited guarantees. So how, as a lender, how do you balance the two?
So honestly, in terms of operational projects, the quality has improved very significantly. We see, and therefore undertakings are in some ways not necessary, as well as not, and even domestic players are not giving undertakings if we see nowadays. So while they are not wanting to use undertakings, but there is also a lot of comfort, as I said, about the way they conduct their business. They're very large names, they have large reputations to manage. Of course, we are in the credit business, so while those are only subjective elements that we will look at, in assessing our risk, but it's fine. I mean, if they are, if in certain projects which are extremely good in quality, undertakings don't come through, there is still a lot of comfort otherwise that comes through, based on the name, based on what it is, they will be highly rated, and so.
Okay, sure. On DFI, like again, government moved really fast. Right? It was announced in the budget, then a bill was passed in a very short span of time. Now, what we understand, a committee also has been formed, top level management has been identified. So do you see DFI coming as a competition, as a complementing agency? What is your overall view?
So I think, Shubham, you detailed it very well in your presentation in terms of how many. We know that NIP is 147 lakh crore, and it basically simply means that you need not one or two, but more than 3, 4, 5 behemoths to be able to accomplish all that over the next 5 years as we speak. So I'm sure NIF was coined, and then this DFI came along. There's certainly the IFCL there as well. So there is enough to be done, and one DFI or two DFIs even is not really going to make competition so difficult that people will find it difficult to kind of do this business. And therefore, I think we are happy that there is going to be good competition. There is going to be far more, because opportunities are immense. The amount of work to be done is immense. The government is very cognizant of that. We are seeing that effectively every month something or the other is coming up. So honestly, from a nation standpoint, the objective, if there are, DFI and all is not there, but they don't think of other platforms that will ensure this, things are not going to happen. Having said that, so DFI is welcome in that sense. The private DFI space, of course, is interesting, which regulations and are yet to kind of emerge more in much more detail, which is something which will be promising, which is what one can kind of look out at. As Utsav mentioned, the kind of investors we will tap. I'm sure we know that in this budget, the government exempted sovereigns and pension funds from incomes out of infra investment, both on the equity and the debt side. So, I mean, a host of such measures that are coming out is essentially indicating towards a lot of recognition and acknowledgement on the government side in what all they are framing, and suggesting in some way that yes, it is now the government is very cognizant of what needs to be done.
Sure. Utsav, one of the participants, Lakshmikant Dukhande, he wants to know any specific reason why government infused capital through CCPS instead of direct equity?
So the instrument that the government chose was CCPS, and the terms of the instrument are also very clear. So we have a fixed time period in which they can convert. So it's 3 years or any other extra investor when they come in. The ratio at which they will convert and the price at which they will convert is also fixed. So practically it is an equity instrument. But since the objective for us as well is to attract more global capital and external investors, so they want to link it to a milestone that once an external investor comes in, then they will convert it to equity. Or in other case, if there is no time period defined, then we will have 3-year time period. So if the investor is not coming in next 3 years, then in the next 3 years, they will convert.
So if I have to extend this point, Utsav, so how do lenders to your company look at the CCPS? They treat it as equity?
They treat it as pure equity because the amount is the conversion price, the ratio of conversion, everything is fixed. So practically, for all practical purposes, it is pure equity.
Also to add, while accounting is only a depiction, but the new Ind AS framework, the IFRS framework, essentially goes on spirit of each transaction.
Correct.
Even under IFRS and Ind AS, this is very purely an equity, and that's how it is on the balance sheet.
Like I was showing the chart earlier in my presentation, IFCs have really grown very, very significantly over the last 5-6 years. So other than the challenges that banks were facing, do you see that IFCs have any like competitive edge over banks?
So I think I kind of said it a little, but I think we are far more specialized. So IFCs, because of their specialized nature, I would believe that, so far as they run based on very, very sound processes, governance, and they are able to kind of attract capital. Because of their pure nature being so specialized, I think they certainly have an edge. Of course, banks have a head start, right? IFCs are not that large, it is only going to grow. Banks have a large head start, but banks will, as I said, the capital or the quantum of capital, let's put it that way, shall change and shall even reduce tomorrow if 3 other sectors become very promising and need a lot of capital other than infra. So to that extent, there is certainly a sound competitive edge. Banks will have, one may argue that banks have CASA, therefore the cost of, funding will be low. But at the same time, our liability base can also be diversified, will be diversified as we speak based on the plan that we have. We shall seek external money. So that shall also happen. And holistically from an asset management standpoint as well. An IFC is far more specialized from a life cycle or a life maintenance of an asset while it is on the book. So you can be an innovator in structuring, which is what we are, planning for. So a lot of host of innovations in terms of how you do deals shall also be more specialized so far as an IFC is concerned versus a pure play bank which does many things.
Sure. So basically what you're saying is lesser number of distractions, lesser number of other obligations, and which makes them much more specialized.
Yeah. Your teams will be far more specialized as well.
Right. So we are running out of time, Nilesh. So, but before we close this conversation, definitely you are here from the lender side. I would like to understand what's your outlook on the interest rates. Inflation has been going through the roof. It touched 12% in October. Any advice to the prospective borrowers? Should they lock in?
Utsav can take that, yes.
Yeah, he must be trying to lock in some borrowings.
Yeah. So the outlook is that the inflation obviously has touched a high number, and it is a good time to lock in fixed rates. So on the liability side, we have again a mix of floating and fixed, but on a general overview perspective, yes, it is a good time to lock in fixed rates.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Nilesh. Thanks a lot, Utsav, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure participants also would have got a good understanding on the sector and on the entity as a whole. So we'll really look forward. And thanks a lot, everyone on the call for connecting and taking out time. We hope that this webinar would have given you some bit of more understanding about the developments in the sector, trends in the financing, and also on this upcoming entity, Aseem Infrastructure Finance Limited. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.